My name's Jeff. I'm going to be talking to you a bit about Polkadot. First, one thing that we didn't have, one thing not blockchain related that we should, it feels like more should be said at the conference than we did, is apparently just yesterday we found out that Germany has decided to vote no on the chat control stuff, which is awesome. So that's quite good. We should have had more of this kind of thing discussed at this meeting. Okay. Anyway, moving on. So what I'm going to talk to you about today is censorship resistance in blockchains. But this is actually, that's a very broad topic, and I'm going to talk to you about more of a specific corner of it. And in particular, what I tend to call the capture problem for L2s. And okay, so, well, just a few words on being censored. We have, generally, we have a lot of censorship concerns on blockchains. I'm very specifically not talking about this stuff like the OFAC compliance things. We have sort of, if you want to think about it, is with censorship, there's a variety of different things you might want to be doing. You might want to just censor something for a long period. You might want to censor something for a long period of time, like permanently, but you might also just want to censor something for short periods of time. Either can be dangerous depending on what you're trying to censor. Now, the main thing that I want to sort of talk to you today about is what happens when you have an L2. So yesterday I gave this talk on Polkadot sharding. Basically, it is like these parachains in Polkadot are what you would call L2s. And in general, anytime you have an L2, you have a question of what happens if the censorship happens at the L2 itself. And you know, with one of these blocks, with any kind of blockchain design, we typically have something like a 2/3 honesty assumption, which we try to maintain for the L1. But on the L2, we have to do something else. Maybe we still want to do something like 2/3 honesty, but if we're doing that, then we now have two separate 2/3 honesty assumptions. We're starting to have a much shittier assumption. Bridges have that problem. In fact, for bridges, it's much worse. If you have a bridge between a bunch of different chains, then something can happen way over here and affect you. That's one of the things that we want to avoid. I mean, so we can already avoid that by solving the soundness things, and this is what I talked about yesterday, or solving the kind of chains validating each other problem. But that's just for sort of correctness, you know, for soundness. What happens when we actually need to talk about censorship? Okay, so kind of the gold standard here would be that we have an L1 and our L2. Ideally, we would want to avoid censorship if even one of the nodes on this L2 was honest. This is seems like kind of a lot to ask, but it would be a standard that would be quite useful to have. Okay. So just generally talking about censorship, again, there's a variety of, this came from an earlier talk. There are a variety of things that people worry about it. None of these techniques, like the encrypted mempool or the order fairness, all of these enforce something relatively local, and in general, with any of these techniques that people discuss, there are certain threat models, certain trade-offs. With these particular ones, generally the solutions are quite heavy. There's also lots of incentive-based stuff. This basically isn't going to work for us to get this kind of one honest type thing. All right, so why do we care so much about this one honest situation? So what we have the story we have in Polkadot is that we have this relay chain, and it had in the past, it had a lot of governance and staking and things on the relay chain itself, which actually used up quite a bit of the CPU time in the relay chain. And what we want to do is we want to, you know, roughly speaking, so if you had like 1,000 validators like is on Kusama, then roughly speaking, if you do some computation on the relay chain, you're sacrificing that amount of computation off of something like 30 parachains. So anything you do here costs roughly 30 times as much, morally speaking. So what we're doing is we're trying to move this balance, staking, et cetera, to a parachain, or to multiple parachains. So certain core functions upon which the security of our core relay chain depends will land on these other parachains. This is kind of a nasty thing to do because of the various L1 attacks. In particular, what we're worried about is sort of what happens if, So what we're worried about is what happens in this capture situation. Okay, so, all right, so the story we want to do is we want to have some kind of round-robin block production for the parachain, so it's relatively simple. We want to assume that just one honest collator is enough. So there's these backer nodes on the relay chain which are actually doing the erasure coding and on the hook for the correctness of the parachain block. Talked about this a tiny bit yesterday. We want to assume that they're honest as well. That's not always true, but because of the rotation, it will be true often enough so that it should be fine. And they participate in the data availability layer, et cetera. Okay, so, right, so, but what we don't want to do is we don't want to introduce like a full 2/3 honesty assumption for these parachains, and we don't want to introduce staking or slashing for them. All right, so, right. So in general, when you have this kind of round-robin block production, it's relatively weak against censorship attacks. You can DOS the nodes. We're not going to solve that. And we have there's a problem with selfish mining, but when do I get to the? So, but our real problem that we're concerned about is that imagine I have 10 nodes on this L2, this parachain, and what's going to happen is we have an honest one coming up, and everybody knows when his slot will come up. What's going to happen is the ones before them are going to delay their block production somewhat to try and basically to constrain the amount of time that he has to even find the block. And now the thing that's not on the slide that's kind of nasty in any L2 situation is that once the guy before him has made his block and registered it on the L1, he isn't going to be able to, the honest guy who comes after that, so this is an honest block, it's just delayed, but the honest guy who comes after it, who's going to try and put in the whatever's being censored, he has to actually be able to build on the thing that's been registered on the L1, which means that he has to go back to the availability layer and reconstruct it, which adds a little bit of, so it's not, he may have to talk to hundreds of relay chain nodes to do this, and he may have to, and he'll have to reconstruct the erasure coding. So all of this will take some amount of time. So the real concern, when I talk about capture attacks, what I mean is that an L2 has a problem that through using the L1, a majority dishonest nodes on the L2 can kind of kick out certain honest nodes. All right. So what this actually looks like. So this is what it's supposed to look like. We have the we have this relay chain going along, and we have these parachain nodes getting registered on the relay chain, and what will happen is let's see. Yeah, so we have the honest guy B. A delays his block production somewhat, and then C builds at the very beginning of his time window, and so and B has not been is still trying to reconstruct the block of A. So this is not just a problem for us; it's a problem for absolutely every L2. But it also isn't, how much you care may depend on what kind of transactions you're doing on the L2. So, All right. So there's a few solutions you might try, but what we ended up deciding that was actually kind of a relatively stupid, simple thing to do is we're going to simply have every one of these parachain nodes, instead of making one block at a time, they're going to make a series, and probably about 3 or 4, but the number we have to pick. The idea is that, so we have this honest guy, and so A is delaying his last block, some of his blocks somewhat, and then B has to, B needs some additional time to reconstruct something, or to reconstruct the last block that A registered. And that will take some number of actual slots here, but in the end, he'll get one in. And now, as long as there's some prioritization about what gets in, like we include the slashing first, or we include the, the election stuff, code that we're running first. Well, election should really just run on its own chain, but then this is enough to give us actually censorship resistance with this assumption that we only need one honest collator. So this is actually quite a nice balance of assumptions here, that we're able to move essential functionality off the relay chain and still have this thing. Okay. So yeah, so there's a bunch of Polkadot words here that I probably shouldn't be using at this conference, but there's a bit of complexity here on our side from so elastic scaling means when a parachain can make multiple blocks across multiple it can basically pretend to be multiple parachains from the perspective of the relay chain in order to go much faster than the relay chain can. So all of this stuff adds some complexity here, but it's all solvable. And yeah, there's some tension, but it has to be sorted out. Yeah, that stuff I don't need. That's very Polkadot specific. I should have probably removed more of the very Polkadot specific stuff from this before the talk. But anyway, so anyway, the takeaway from this talk is that when you're using multiple chains, even once you've solved the soundness problem, there will still be the liveness problems are very real. And if you want to actually have a system that really works the way you expect a multiple, kind of a multiple sharded database thing to work, then you need to be prepared to address the liveness problems as well. So maybe I'll quit at that, and if anybody has any questions, that was quite fast and a bit heavy on the Polkadot side, because originally it was only at the last minute that this talk, somebody asked me to give a second talk, and my general audience talk was yesterday. This one is a bit Polkadot specific, but if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask, and I'll try and maybe dig into other things. Okay.